Superhero Talk Show. I am your host, Brad West, with my wonderful co-host, Greg Burrow from Dragons Are Comic and Fantasy, and Anastasia Anderson. And we are doing Send in the Clones! We're talking about Send in the Clones! We are doing SpiderClones this week. We hope to come back and revisit cloning again in the future because there's so much fun superhero. We originally were just going to do clones and do like Spider-Man one day and Superman another day. But
there's too much.
It's impossible. No, I can do multiple weeks on just Spider-Man alone.
We could make a year on these dissertations.
Right. You know what? This is what it feels like.
It's not dissertation.
I've been going back and rereading and re-researching, and there's been things I'm like, I forgot this, or I didn't know this, and it was just like, it was worse than I thought. And then it's one of those, it's what we talk about in geekdom all the time. Nostalgia glasses. I loved this. When I was first collecting, like when I was actually earnestly collecting Spider-Man with my own money, going to the comic shop, this is what was going on. It was Spider-Man's 35th anniversary leading right into all of this when you get to the Clone Saga and everything. And I loved it. I love Ben Reilly. I love Scarlet Spider. I love Kane. And we're going to talk more about him today than we did yesterday. And I really love so much of the stuff that came out of it. The problem was,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And the irony is that the whole purpose of the Clone Saga in the 90s was Marvel wanted to streamline Spider-Man down. They wanted to get rid of Mary Jane. They wanted to get rid of Aunt May. They wanted to have a new, fresh Spider-Man. They wanted to make it less confusing for readers.
I'm sorry, this is streamlined and less confusing.
But it blew up in their face.
This is streamlined and less confusing?
The original intention was there. It did not play out that way.
This is not the case.
Even now, like, as much as I remember reading, there's still so much of it, I'm like, if my mind is boggling, I'm like, how did I keep up with this?
Yeah, how did people keep track of this? Jesus Christ.
And the thing is, people did not.
Right, you just kind of get new information and just accept it and move on.
And I say people did not because this led into Marvel deciding we're gonna go different directions, different writers, different people. This is how Straczynski. This is how Straczynski got the reins of Spider-Man. And this is when you start getting into Civil War and all this stuff, and One More Day, and everything like that. And when I say people didn't keep up with it, I mean as mere mortals. Now, I talk about all the time, one of my favorite writers of modern comics is Dan Slott. Dan Slott was brilliant in his take on Spider-Man and Spider-Man mythos. He worked very diligently to do his research and go back and pull things from all eras of Spider-Man, and he tried really hard to tighten them up, wrap them up, bring in loose ends, and stuff like that. And he worked really hard on incorporating a lot of this mess from the 90s Spider-Man to kind of make sense of it. And I think he did a great job. And one of his biggest marks on the Spider-Man universe was Spider Island and the Spider-Verse. And these are two things that end up leading into the clones as they are currently in the Spider-Man comic books. Now, Spider Island was an ongoing series where basically the Jackal, this is why it's important, the Jackal, who was responsible for creating the clones in the first place and who cloned himself in the 90s and apparently has been going rampant with cloning, took the technology and created a strain of genetically altered bedbugs to release on the island of Manhattan, randomly giving people spider powers. Read that story. I'm not going to tell you all about that. All I'm going to tell you is that by the time it's all said and done, the character of Kane has come back. Kane was the imperfect clone of Peter Parker, who was a little bit mad because he had this degeneration problem and his powers were amped up. His powers were so amped up, he used his ability to stick to walls to create what he called the Mark of Kane. He would literally touch people, rip their skin off, and leave his handprint on them.
Jesus Christ.
As his, that was his mark on his victims. He murdered, he was the first person to actually kill Dr. Octopus before he came back, and I'm doing that. But Kane was a brutal version of Spider-Man. It was a little bit crazy. He worked for the Assassin's Guild. He was, But when all was said and done, and they found a cure for Spider Island, they created a cure to cure all the people who were randomly turning into spider mutants. And they accidentally cured Kane of the degeneration. So up until this point, the Kane clone had been running around slightly mad, and his whole excuse was he's deformed and he's crazy and blah, 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 blah. Well, Peter accidentally cures him, and now he's not crazy anymore. He's still pretty hardcore. He's still pretty brutal, but he's not insane anymore. And he ends up helping Spider-Man save the day. And in doing so, Peter's like, okay, look, go, run away before, I won't tell anybody you were here. I won't tell anybody you survived. He's like, my gift to you is I believe in you. I'm giving you a chance. This is your second chance. I'm giving you your second chance.
He does this a lot.
So before we go any further, why does Mary Jane not get the spider powers when she gets bitten by the bed bugs?
Okay. Spider Island was really amusing because everybody gets bitten by this thing and starts randomly getting spider powers.
I totally know the answer, but I want to make him uncomfortable. That's why I'm making
so that's why I know the answer. I'm like, oh god.
Everybody randomly starts getting spider powers, and then which is awesome. Everybody's like, oh cool, we got spider powers. But then they start mutating into mutant spider monsters. But Mary Jane does not. And this is their first clue at developing a cure. It's like, why does Mary Jane not turn into the thing? And so they go to Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four to examine her and find out why Mary Jane is not turning into a monster spider. And he proceeds to try and tell Peter and Mary Jane in a very, very frumpy old man way. He's like, well, you see, it's because of your intimate, And then Peter goes, is it because we share a toothbrush? And then he's like,
yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah, it's because you share a toothbrush.
She has his cooties.
She has his cooties, basically. Yes, exactly. So anyway, Mary Jane was, and that's the point where that's when she gets the powers. Is when Peter starts, and she pulls out the bracelets and uses them, and has web shooters and stuff. It was a fun story. Anyway.
Yes.
But going back to, and then when I was talking about Venom and the anti-Venom. That was the other ingredient that managed to get the cure, was the anti-venom aspect of Eddie Brock. And anyway, but because Kane helped him, he went to go leave New York, and he stole Spider-Man's big time suit, which was his stealth suit, which is actually one of my favorite costumes that the Spider-Man has. And the character of Madam Webb, the second Madam Webb, Julia Carpenter, basically, she knew that he was going to have some kind of a destiny, so she screwed with the costume. So she took its ability to change colors, and she limited it only to red. And she told him that there was a reason for that. Well, he decides he's going to leave New York. And this is at a time when Marvel Comics was putting out this edict. They're like, well, why do all of our superheroes always have to be in New York? And so they started telling the writers, we want you to reach out and create characters or do stories in cities that are not New York. And the reason this is because, we're in Austin, and I was born in a suburb of Houston, so this is a Texas thing. Well, they decided to put the new Spider-Man, or the new Scarlet Spider story in Houston, Texas. And Christopher Yost and Ryan Stegman, and you'll know Ryan Stegman has become really big since then, because he's done all the new Venom stuff with Donny Cates and everything. He redesigned the Scarlet Spider costume. So Kane decides he's going to run away to Mexico and just escape and live in Mexico and be free, where nobody's going to extradite him or whatever. And he ends up passing through Houston, Texas, where he gets caught up in this human trafficking ring, and he rescues this young girl from these coyotes, as they call them, who are transporting. Yeah. They're charging Mexican nationals to bring them to the U.S. and then just killing them and everything. And so he ends up inadvertently being thrust upon him to be heroic. I love the comic book because It's the tagline is all of the power, none of the responsibility. He's basically asshole Spider-Man. Is the whole point of this comic book, and it's amazing. It's an amazing book. Kane becomes the new Scarlet Spider, and he's in the red suit. And just like, and I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, Ben Reilly, when he became Scarlet Spider, he didn't call himself Scarlet Spider. That was something that J. Jonah Jameson came up with to tag him as another Spider-Man. In fact, he first appears in the newspapers as like, is the new Scarlet Spider in cahoots with Spider-Man? Blah, 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 blah. So the media dubs him Scarlet Spider. Well, when Kane gets to Houston, and of course he's in the red suit, they start calling him Scarlet Spider, which he's very annoyed by, because in the previous series, he spent his whole time tormenting Ben Reilly. And so you kind of find out from Madam Webb that she did that to remind him to be heroic, to remind him of how Ben Reilly was heroic and how Ben Reilly had died and everything, and then he needs to be like Ben Reilly. So she wanted him to constantly remember Ben Reilly as the Scarlet Spider, and hence made his costume red. Now, this is a personal side note. This is a fun little interesting story. I don't know if I've told you. Just me personally. I cosplay the Ben Reilly Spider-Man, and I have for many years, like since 2007. But before I even met you, I think I still had that costume. I already had that costume. I've redone it like 3 times and improved it more and more each time. Well, when the new Kane series came out in 2011, we found out that because we're here in Austin, we found out Houston, Texas, Marvel Comics was having a signing at a comic book shop there, and Christopher Yost and Ryan Stegman, the writer and the artist who are doing the new series, were going to be there with advanced copies, so we were going to get the copy like a month early. And I was really excited to do that. I wanted to go do that, right? And so I was like, I'm going to go in my Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider costume. Well, my husband, we had previously done Dragon Con, and we had gone to this Spider-Man villain party, and I had made him a Tarantula costume. Now, the Tarantula was a Spider-Man villain from back early in the day, who was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master, and he had like knives on his feet, and it was really kind of cool. And the Tarantula's costume was black and red. It had a really cool, unique design to it.
Yeah.
Well, we went as the Tarantula and Scarlet Spider. We went to the signing, and Christopher Yost got super excited. He jumped up, and he came up to us, and I thought he was going to be more excited about my costume, because I was Ben Reilly, the original Scarlet Spider. And he went to my husband, Bo, and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're wearing the Tarantula costume. And he's like, I originally wanted the new Kane Scarlet Spider costume to be the Tarantula costume, but with the mask. His original design for it was to make the Tarantula costume only to have the mask on it. But Marvel just said, like, no, we want something new that's marketable. We want something new. But originally, he was going to make him the Tarantula costume.
It's like, we can't sell this to children with knives on it.
With knives on the feet, yes. So, at any rate, we had actually got...
really early in Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man. I almost want to say it was number 1, maybe.
I don't remember exactly which one, but I do know it was early on.
Tarantula and Will-o'-the-Wisp.
And Will-o'-the-Wisp.
Are really early.
Exactly. So anyway, it was cool. We got invited to go to the live broadcast at Alamo Draft House. We're like, hey, why don't you come and do this live streaming thing that we're going to do with the launch of the comic book and everything? And we're like, okay, well, cool. We're just going to be there in like the audience or whatever. And they're like, why don't you come up on stage?
You're just like, cool, great.
And so we were actually part of the launch of the Kane Scarlet Spider, which is like, a super fanboy dream for me because I love the Scarlet Spiders. And I love the Kane Scarlet Spider series for so many different reasons, and I'll let y'all read it. But it was one of my favorite depictions of a LGBTQ character set. His supporting characters were these husbands. One was a police officer who was constantly using him to help him solve crimes, and his husband was a surgeon who basically became his medic. So he had this really amazing supporting cast. The character of Araceli / Hummingbird was really fun. And all kinds of really fun stuff came back from other comic books.
And even now they're still doing that where they're trying to get more and more inclusive, I guess. Because like, for example, right now, I think it's still going on, the United States of Captain America, where every state has its own Captain America.
Oh, yeah!
And also talking about every state having its own thing, during the original Civil War, after Civil War, they had the Initiative, in which Iron Man was like, again, Marvel's like, we want superheroes in other cities. They are trying to create a superhero team in every state. And the Rangers, of course, was the name of the superhero team for Texas.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So the Rangers show up in the Scarlet Spider book because they're in Texas. It's really cool.
Hey.
My favorite issue is where, because like I mentioned yesterday, Kane was on the League of Assassins. Well, Belladonna, the queen of the League of Assassins and Gambit's ex-wife, she comes. Kane's trying to be good now, and she's like, "You can't just leave the League of Assassins and be good. Who do you think you are? You don't leave us." And she starts sending all of these other assassins after him, and he takes every one of them down. And she's like, "Okay, fine. Here's what we'll do. I'll let you off the hook, but you owe me one assassination in the future of my choice." And she sends him to assassinate Wolverine.
Oh.
And read this. It is the best interaction if you've ever read anything between Wolverine and Spider-Man. And we're talking about how characters are annoyed by Spider-Man. Wolverine is the most annoyed by Spider-Man. So when he encounters a Spider-Man that's more like him, it's really, really funny. He's like, "You look like him, and you even smell like him, but you're not him. I know you're not him." And another cool thing is that during this Straczynski run, one of the stories was The Other. It's when Spider-Man dies, and they're trying to make the comic book like the movies and give him organic web shooters and give him all these new powers and everything. So Spider-Man gets these powers from this interdimensional being, which is a slight spider being called The Other, and it's when he gets these pointy spindles under his arms. Well, Kane ends up in the long run getting those powers instead. So the reason I like the Kane Scarlet Spider series is because he had different powers than Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Whereas Peter had the resources to make webs and web shooters, Kane has organic webbing, which is more limited. However, because he's in Houston, Texas, and not New York, the buildings are further apart. He doesn't have the same ability to swing, so he has to figure out how to get around when he's like, "What's with all of these buildings being so far apart? What's you call this a metropolitan area?" He gets really irritated because he's limited. He has to jump from cars and start riding taxis and stuff and everything.
Oh
It's a really good story, especially if you're from Houston and from Texas. They did their research. They've got the Ryan Stegman. He put landmarks and buildings, and it looks like Houston. I mean, it's obviously a fictional version of it, but it's still really very cool. So anyway, Kane Scarlet Spider is really good in that. And that leads into the return of Ben Reilly in the Clone Conspiracy. So we get back to Dan Slott. Dan Slott creates a series called the Clone Conspiracy, and Ben Reilly has come back from the grave. He's no longer a pile of goo. You find out, the Jackal, the guy who started this whole thing in the first place, was trying to advance his cloning technology even further. So he managed to come behind the scene, gather up the goo that was the melted Ben Reilly, and cloned him again. And then he killed him. And then cloned him again. And then he killed him. And he kept cloning him and cloning him and killing him and killing him and trying to perfect the clone and getting it better and better and better. Problem was, because of the Jackal's cloning technology being a quantum cloning, and Ben's consciousness carrying over from clone to clone.
Yeah, basically he's noticing him die every single time. What could possibly go wrong?
He lives through all of his deaths until he snaps.
This could absolutely go wrong.
So he snaps, he breaks free, he enslaves the Jackal, Miles Warren. He clones Miles Warren and then does it multiple times, and tells him he will only tell them who the real clone is if they work for him. So he's enslaved. He's got his own team of the Jackals, and he becomes the new Jackal, which is actually really cool. I'm going to cosplay this one. He's got this red suit with this Egyptian Anubis mask thing. It's really cool. And he goes on to start resurrecting everybody that has ever died in Spider-Man's career from the beginning of the Spider-Man comics. He decides that he's going to use the cloning technology for good, and he's going to take all of this guilt and pressure and all of this doubt that Peter has over him from letting people die, from letting villains die, from letting innocents die, from letting loved ones die, etc., and he's going to bring them all back so that Peter doesn't have to feel bad about it anymore.
Oh, that's a thing that will never go wrong.
Well, except it does. After the Spider-Verse story, the original Spider-Verse that the movie is based on, several of the alternate reality Spider-Mans formed this team called the Webb Warriors. The Webb Warriors basically stuck around to police the web of life and destiny, the multiverse, and go from world to world and and help. Originally, their tenet was to protect worlds where there was no longer a Spider-Man. Because in the original Spider-Verse storyline, Morlun was jumping from world to world and eating spider totems. So they were going to protect the worlds where there wasn't a Spider-Man. Well, in doing so, the Masterweaver, basically the control hub for the Web of Life and Destiny, discovers that every world that Ben Reilly has done this on has come to a cataclysmic end.
Yeah.
And he discovers why. Because, I was telling you, Carry On.
Oh.
So remember how I told you Carry On was a clone of Miles Warren, the Jackal, but it was an unstable one, and it was a genetic, and he passed on from person to person and overrode their genetic code? Basically, Ben did not realize that all the clones he was creating were slowly turning into the Carry On virus.
Oh my god.
And that while he thought he was saving people, he was actually creating a plague that was going to wipe out the whole world. And so Kane, Scarlet Spider, teams up with Gwen's Spider-Gwen, and together they both come and help Peter bring down the whole thing. And of course Ben is a little off kilter, so he doesn't realize, he thinks he's doing good. But anyway, when all is said and done, it's fine. They kill everybody. So anyway, half of the characters in Spider-Man's world have come back as clones in some shape or form, or died. I don't know. I mean, I know that there's like a question as to whether or not Silver Sable is a clone or not. I don't know, but it leads into a third Scarlet Spider series where Ben Reilly, no longer the Jackal, is trying to redeem himself and be good again and prove that he was only trying to help and that he's not crazy anymore. And I like that series too.
He only messed up a smidge.
He did mess up a pretty smidge. And then this leads into the Spider-Geddon, which is the follow-up to the original Spider-Verse series. And in Spider-Geddon, all of the Inheritors, who were the interdimensional vampires, and that's a whole other story, you'll have to look at that one. I can't even begin to lay the groundwork for that. But basically, they come back. It's actually Dr. Octopus's fault, because Dr. Octopus is screwing around with cloning technology again. Now, the reason that this is important, and this is the connection of this with the clone part of it, is this. The Inheritors are an ancient race who have perfected cloning on a global scale. They literally have an entire world of clone factories. And what they've done is they have figured out a way to live immortally by broadcasting their conscious through space and time across the multiverse to this one planet where they've got an endless supply of bodies so they can never die. This is the clone part of this. And Dr. Octopus, who is just coming off of the end of being part of the Superior Spider-Man, where he has taken over Peter's body, is trying to create his own new body to go into, because after Superior Spider-Man, his body is kaput. And so he's trying to revive the Inheritors cloning technology. And this is where Spider-Geddon comes from. Now, there was a really cool mini-series during Spider-Verse called The Scarlet Spiders, where the different clones, another version of Ben Reilly, who is still alive, came back. Kane was there, and we're going to talk about her Friday, Ultimate Universe Spider-Woman, go to the world to destroy the clones. It's a really cool series, and it's all about clones and stuff. But anyway, Dr. Octopus tries to create this perfect clone body for him, and all he ends up doing is basically giving the Inheritors some place to download their brains into, and so they override these clones, and they come back, and they start causing havoc again. And what they ended up doing was, Ben Reilly ultimately sacrifices himself to save everybody, and he gives himself over to the Inheritors, who live off of the life force of the spider totems, because they're connected to the web of life and destiny. But because Ben has died 23 times or something like that, his soul essence is corrupt, and it poisons them when they try to eat him.
Oh my god.
So that was the last time you saw Ben Reilly up until earlier this year. Earlier this year, he made a brief appearance in an Iron Man comic book that I just found out about, and I just literally bought today, so I can't tell you exactly what happened in that. But they are bringing him back this month as Spider-Man. And the interesting thing about that is, this is very much to do what they originally set out to do in the 90s. He will be taking over as the main Spider-Man again. And I know you were talking about all the really cool technologies that Peter has come up with, and I was talking about, the cool things that Ben came up with that he never used. Well, the Beyond Corporation which has some kind of connection to the Beyonder, has bought Parker Industries.
Oh no.
They have bought Parker Industries and somehow managed to obtain the legal rights to the name of Spider-Man. And so they have convinced Ben Reilly to work with them as the new perfect Spider-Man. And they have given him all of the technology that Peter no longer has access to. So now he's got all of the really cool tech that Peter had when he was running Parker Industries. And so that's what literally just launched this week.
Which, of course, if you've been following the comics, most of Parker Industries was actually created by Dr. Octopus.
Dr. Octopus and a lot of his team and stuff. So that's where we are today with Ben Reilly and the Clone Conspiracy as it stands. So that's
All right.
literally, it took us 3 days for me to sum up the Peter / Ben / Kane side of SpiderClones. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Miles Morales' clone conspiracy. Because he had his own Clone Saga recently.
He just finished it.
He just finished it too. So, and do you have any questions for me? Because, I hope I wrapped it up. You guys in my audience standing today.
I will say this, that's really hilarious. Miles Morales, Spider-Man number 30. He's hosting Saturday Night Live.
Yes, and we are going to talk about that tomorrow. It's going to be really fun.
Perfect.
It's going to be very fun. So thank you for joining us.
Question, did you read the one, a long time ago where, was it Spider-Man that was on David Letterman? I think, no.
I have seen that, yes.
Yeah.
The Spider-Man was on David Letterman. I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. They bring, I do have the Avengers, I have read the Avengers storyline with Jim Belushi and Saturday Night Live was in it. I have read that one. So this is not the first time Saturday Night Live has made it into Marvel Comics. So anyway.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa, okay. Oh yes, of course, we played that for you, didn't we, at Christmas? So thank you for joining us on the Red Web and our Clone Saga, which the saga will continue tomorrow. Make sure you go to bradsredweb.com to follow us, like us, and subscribe. Please share, tell your friends about us, and tell us what you think, how we think we're doing. Keep your eye out for the Patreon in the future. We're going to have some fun, and I warn you right now, maybe some NSFW kind of stuff, because we're not gonna what's the word I'm looking for? Censor.
Edit.
We're not gonna censor edit as much as we do for you guys on the Facebook page. So thank you for joining us, and we love you. We'll see you tomorrow.
And if you want to hear us talk about anything, if you want us to delve into anything for you guys, or you want to hear our opinions on anything, please
Drop
send
us a
us lines.
Yes, please.
Let us know what you want to see. Especially on our Patreon. What content do you want to see on our Patreon?
Yep, and it's Patreon /BradsRedWeb.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.